Today, we're going to dive into a leadership journey that uncovered a single, truly transformative skill. We're talking about something that turns costly, frustrating friction into real, profound wisdom. It's a great story about realizing that what you think is the problem often isn't the problem at all.
So let me ask you this. What is the one mistake that can turn even the most well-intentioned, hardworking leaders into the biggest bottlenecks in their own organization? The answer, it turns out, is hiding inside a real-world story about a pretty high-stakes error, a massive misunderstanding, and the incredible lesson that came out of it all.
All right, so our story kicks off in a pretty tense situation. A really significant payroll error was discovered. A key employee had been overpaid for almost an entire year. So the leader, feeling the pressure, had to call this employee in for what was bound to be a difficult conversation. And he walked in ready for a fight.
And you can hear it right here in the leader's own words. He admitted he was stirred up. What that tells you is that he'd already built this whole story in his head about how the conversation was going to go. He was defensive, he was confrontational, and he was just ready to hold the line.
And this right here, this is where the whole thing just breaks down. The leader walks in, assuming the employee is going to demand to keep the money, maybe even threaten to quit. But the employee, his mind went somewhere else entirely. He was terrified. He was panicking, thinking, how on earth am I going to pay all this back? They were literally having two different conversations from the very first word.
So, after the conversation, which thankfully did get sorted out, the leader started reflecting on what went wrong. His first thought was, man, I just need more patience, or maybe I need to show more grace. But he pretty quickly realized that his self-diagnosis was totally off, and that led him to the real aha moment of this entire experience.
He realized that just, gritting his teeth and trying to force himself to be more patient, that would have just been a band-aid. It wouldn't have changed his wrong assumption or that defensive energy he brought into the room. Patience was just a symptom, not the cause.
And you know what? It wasn't a lack of grace either. Just blindly saying, hey, don't worry about it, wouldn't have actually solved anything. It wouldn't have gotten to the root of the problem, and it definitely wouldn't have revealed what the employee was so afraid of. So you have to ask, if the answer wasn't patience and it wasn't grace, what was actually missing?
Is it possible that the skill he was truly missing was something way deeper, something much more powerful than either patience or grace? This question, right here, this unlocked everything.
The missing piece was discernment. You can think of it as wisdom in action. And the key thing here is that it's not some innate personality trait you're born with. No, it's a trainable skill. It's the ability to pause, gain a real understanding of what's going on, and then act from a place of knowledge, not from a place of fear.
Okay, so how do you actually do that? How do you practice it? How do you build that skill? Well, it turns out the most powerful tool for developing discernment is actually deceptively simple. It all comes down to the power of asking a good question.
And this is absolutely crucial to understand. Discernment is an active process. It isn't something you just have. It is something you do. It's a disciplined, intentional choice you make, especially in those moments when you feel yourself getting all spun up and jumping to conclusions. So here's what that process looks like. First, you have to pause your assumption. Just intentionally slow everything down. Second, you ask questions to understand, not to accuse. A simple question like, hey, can you help me understand what you're most concerned about right now? That would have changed everything in our story. Third, you let their answers give you clarity. And finally, you act from that place of knowledge, not fear. And the leader's reflection on this says it all, doesn't it? It is really hard to make a mistake when you just slow things down and ask questions. When you lead with genuine curiosity instead of pre-baked conclusions, the path forward is always going to be based on truth, not some false story you made up in your head. Okay, this is where it gets really exciting, because this is where an individual skill can scale up and become an organizational superpower. When leaders start practicing discernment consistently, it lays the foundation to shift from that old top-down culture to something so much more powerful, a leader-leader culture.
It means finally getting rid of what you might call the mother may I culture. You know, the one where every single problem, every little decision has to travel all the way up the chain of command, which just creates massive bottlenecks right at the top.
And the shift here is, well, it's profound. In the old leader-follower model, people bring you problems. The bus broke down, what do I do? But in a leader-leader model, people bring you their intents. The bus broke down, I intend to call maintenance, alert the parents, and get a substitute. Do you see any issues with that plan? The ownership just completely flips.
And the benefits of this are just transformative. You're not just making things more efficient, you are building real ownership, you're building critical thinking skills, and you are developing trust at a massive scale. This frees up senior leaders to do the strategic work they're supposed to be doing and creates an organization that's resilient and not dependent on one person for everything.
So this whole journey, from that initial misunderstanding to wisdom, from an individual skill to a whole cultural shift, it results in a really profound change in a leader's identity. You actually move from being the bottleneck to becoming the waymaker.
See, the goal is no longer to have all the answers or make all the decisions. The goal is to stop being that single point of failure and instead become the chief empowerer of the mission. Your job becomes creating the conditions for everyone else to lead effectively.
And that leads to this fundamental mindset shift. Waymakers don't waste all their energy bracing for some worst-case scenario they've just imagined. Instead, they invest that energy preparing for their purpose, because they know they have the tools, like discernment, to handle whatever reality actually throws at them.
Ultimately, this is the difference between just managing a list of tasks and truly stewarding a legacy. One is all about control and reaction. The other is about empowerment, trust, and creating an impact that lasts.
So, I'll leave you with this to think about. What is one assumption in your work, in your life, anywhere that's creating friction for you right now? And what is one simple question you could ask that might just replace that assumption with genuine understanding? The answer to that could really change everything.